At 1 a.m. on 1 November 1943, in the middle of a brutal North Atlantic storm, the U.S. destroyer USS Borie, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Charles Harris Hutchins, hunted U-405, a Type 6IC, under Korvettenkapitan Rolf Heinrich Hauptmann. After a long sonar duel, Borie forced the submarine to surface with depth charges, then broke the battle open. Guns, a boarding clash on the slick steel deck, a deliberate ram at full speed, and a final sequence of torpedoes, flares, and catastrophic flooding that left both crews fighting not only each other, but the ocean itself. The destroyer won the engagement, yet paid for it with her own sinking and heavy loss of life. It's 1 a.m. on the 1st of November, 1943. The North Atlantic is not water tonight, it is a living machine. Black swells lifting and slamming the hull, wind punching spray into every seam, rain turning the bridge windows into smeared glass. The storm doesn't just surround the ship, it tries to break it. On the bridge of USS Borie, the air is sharp with salt and cold metal. The ship pitches and shudders, and every man on deck learns the same lesson in the same instant. The ocean is not background, it's the enemy too. Inside the cramped glow of the Combat Information Center, a radar trace blooms across the screen like a single fragile line of hope. Contact, 8,000 yards, bearing 170. Lieutenant Commander Charles Harris Hutchins is only 30, but the weather and the war have already carved seriousness into his face. He doesn't hesitate. Turn 170, flank speed. The order is simple, but it turns the destroyer into a weapon. The engines answer with a deep, rising growl. The propellers bite the sea and throw sheets of foam outward. The Borie drives itself forward like it means to punch a hole through the storm. Out in the black water, 5 nautical miles away, another crew is living a different kind of night. U-405, a Type 6C submarine, floats on the surface in the temporary illusion of safety. Batteries charging, air being refreshed, the crew trying to steal a few minutes of normalcy under the cover of darkness. The sea is rough, but the submarine knows how to ride the surface when it must. The men are exhausted in the way only long patrols can make a body feel. Bone-deep fatigue that turns every movement into work. Then the sound arrives, subtle at first, then undeniable. In the cramped dimness of the listening station, the hydrophone operator freezes. The noise is not random ocean noise. It has a signature, a rhythm that a trained ear can recognize, the way a rifleman recognizes the snap of a firing pin. High-speed ship, bearing 90. Korvettenkapitan Rolf Heinrich Hauptmann doesn't need a map to understand what that means. There are no friendly surface ships in this patch of ocean tonight. The only logical owner of that sound is an enemy destroyer, fast, aggressive, and hunting. Alarms slam through the submarine in a chain reaction. Bells, shouting, the metallic clatter of men moving faster than the narrow passageways were ever meant to handle. The order comes out hard and immediate. Prepare to dive. All hands to battle stations. 45 men translate fear into process, securing hatches, locking down equipment, running to their stations with hands that know the choreography even when the mind is racing. The U-boat is not just a vessel now. It is a trapped animal preparing to vanish into the only hiding place it has left, the deep. Back on Borie, Hutchins stares into a darkness that gives nothing back. He can't see the submarine. He can only hunt its shadow, a set of numbers that must be trusted more than his own eyes. The radar operator keeps feeding him updates. Hutchins turns them into movement. Steady as she goes. 2000, bearing 265. For a moment, it feels like control, like the destroyer has the ocean pinned down. Then the contact collapses. Contact has been lost, sir. Cold slides down Hutchins' spine. The U-boat has disappeared, gone under, into the only space where the destroyer is suddenly blind and the hunter becomes the one being hunted. He doesn't allow the fear to show. He turns the ship back into the only kind of weapon that works now: persistence. Half speed. Any returns on sonar? The sea answers with silence. And then, finally, with a single pulse of possibility. In the black water below, the war becomes geometry. Angles, bearings, timing, how long it takes a sound to travel, how fast a target can shift course, how quickly a destroyer can translate a faint echo into a killing solution. On U-405, Hauptmann listens through headphones that feel like they're pressed directly against his nerves. The destroyer is out there. The problem is not if it will find them, only when and how close it will get before the submarine can disappear again. The hydrophone operator hears Borie's propellers, but the data is not clean enough to strike back. It is the worst kind of information, real but not actionable, a threat you can sense without being able to answer. Hauptmann makes the only decision that still feels like control. Turn to port. He is trying to buy distance, to slip the destroyer's net before it tightens. Inside the boat, every man feels the countdown. The pressure outside the hull is indifferent, relentless, waiting for any mistake to become fatal. Meanwhile, on Borie, the crew rides the other side of the equation. They do not need to see the U-boat. They only need to corner it long enough to force it into a bad choice. The sonar operators begin calling out numbers like prayers that must be answered with action. Sonar contact, 2,000 yards, bearing 170. Turn 170. The destroyer swings toward the contact, muscles and steel turning the ocean into a narrowing corridor. The sound of the hull cutting through waves blends with the clipped rhythm of orders. Every second is already being spent. Then the contact jumps, shifts, just enough to make the room go tight. 600 yards. Prepare port launchers for depth charges. Men sprint. Racks clatter. The ship itself becomes a moving machine designed for one purpose: to turn water into a weapon. For a heartbeat, the hunt seems to snap into place. Then the sonar line winks out. Contact has been lost, sir. The U-boat has slipped under the destroyer's belly. Hutchins reacts without drama, because drama is a luxury you cannot afford on a bridge that is trying to kill or be killed. 500 yards, now bearing starboard, drawing fast. Full to starboard. The destroyer swings hard, her stern coming around like a hook designed to drag the submarine into the killing zone. The depth charges are already being readied. The whole ship is aligning itself around one brutal idea: force it to the surface.
300 yards. Fire.
The charges leave the racks with heavy, final thunks and drop into the storm dark sea like stones thrown at a buried enemy. Their splashes are the first punctuation marks in a sentence that ends in catastrophe. Underwater, the world becomes pressure and shock. The explosions don't need to touch the submarine to hurt it. The sea itself becomes the hammer. The bow shudders, containers shift, metal screams in microfractures that no human can hear, but every sailor can feel. Hauptmann receives the report that changes everything. Flooding in the bow, sir. There is no fix for this at depth. The ocean is not a problem you can patch. It is a force that takes what it wants. Hauptmann has one remaining option left that is still a choice at all. Surface and man the guns. In the instant the U-boat begins to rise, the fight stops being hidden and becomes brutally visible. Two steel machines colliding in the open, under a sky that offers no mercy. The sea is still trembling from the depth charge blasts when the impossible happens. The The U-405 bursts up through the water like a wounded animal, ripping itself free of a trap. Borie's crew watches the submarine explode out of the black, water sheeting off its hull, the conning tower clawing into the wind. For an instant, the world freezes, two enemies suddenly face to face, with no fog of distance left to hide behind. It's surfaced on our stern. Turn on the searchlight. Inform lights where to point. A white beam cuts through the storm and pins the U-boat in place. The German sailors become visible, not just silhouettes, but human figures, faces, jerking movements, hands gripping metal in the rain. They spill out of hatches in a rush that is half discipline, half desperation, racing to their guns while the ocean tries to shove them back into the sea. Then the night erupts. 20-millimeter cannon bark, sharp, brutal cracks that slice through wind noise and wave noise alike. Shells whip across the gap between steel hulls and slam into Borie's superstructure, punching dents into plates, showering fragments across the decks. On U-405's deck, men fire through spray and darkness, shoulders hunched against the cold. The Borie's spotlight catches their faces in harsh relief, eyes narrowed, jaws clenched, the expression of men who understand that the next few seconds will decide whether they survive the night or become another set of bodies swallowed by the Atlantic. Hutchins understands the math of the situation instantly. The Germans have a fighting chance only if they can keep their heavier weapon, an 88-millimeter deck gun, in the game. He moves without drama, because the destroyer's strength is not romance, it is coordination. All guns, local control, pointer fire. The first salvos are wild. Water splashes behind the submarine, the shots climbing over the target. The crew adjusts, muscles and eyes learning the moving geometry in real time. Then the Borie's guns begin to land with surgical cruelty. Shells crash through U-405's forecastle and tear into the men trying to hold the line. The German gunners, especially those at the 88mm, are suddenly exposed not just to fire, but to the brutal clarity of being watched by 4-inch naval guns aimed directly at them. The deck becomes a funnel for violence. Men sprinting, slipping, falling, the sound of metal striking metal, the thunder of repeated impacts, the click of empty air where a weapon should have fired. Even under that pressure, the Germans keep moving, because stopping is surrender, and surrender is a word that does not fit inside the training and pride of a Kriegsmarine crew. But the reality is brutal. The destroyer's gunnery is systematically stripping the submarine of every tool it has left to fight back. Hutchins feels the problem sharpening inside his mind like a knife edge. The U-boat is still afloat. It still has torpedoes. It still has the capacity to kill, even while bleeding out. He goes for the one solution that removes ambiguity. Ram it! The order changes everything on deck. The sea is already trying to tear the ship apart. Now the destroyer is going to choose impact as a weapon. Stand by for a ram. Stand by for a ram. Every man on Borie feels the shift in the air, an almost physical pressure of expectation. The ship's helm turns, the engines strain, the deck trembles under boots that suddenly feel very small compared to what is coming. Borie drives forward at 27 knots, a mass of steel and momentum aimed directly at the U-boat's flank. The ocean screams around the hull, and for a heartbeat, the world holds its breath. Two machines about to collide like fists in a boxing ring, where the floor is water. Then, impact. The collision is not a sound so much as a rearrangement of reality. The destroyer's bow bites into the submarine's side, and the U-boat's hull buckles like sheet metal under a hammer blow. Shock travels through both vessels, shaking men off their feet, wrenching equipment from its mounts, turning every unsecured object into a projectile. Inside Borie, deep below deck, Chief Engineer Kenneth Miles Lucas feels the disaster as a change in temperature and pressure. The sudden cold of water where there should be none. The sickening vibration of a hull that has been compromised. He hears it before he sees it. Water rushing into spaces that must remain dry. Get me the repair team. The fight is no longer only outside the ship. It has moved into the engine spaces, into valves and pumps, and the invisible arteries that keep a destroyer alive. Every second now is measured in gallons and inches of rising water. On U-405, Hauptmann forces himself upright, despite the shock, blood and seawater mixing on the deck. He does what a commander must do when the deck is turning into a storm. He gives the only order left that still resembles agency. Attack! German sailors surge out of the hatches and across the slick steel, charging into a battle that is no longer about torpedoes or radars. This is hand-to-hand violence on a moving, pitching platform. American sailors answer with whatever they have: Tommy guns, pistols, rifles. The Germans fight back with whatever can be turned into a weapon under the circumstances: flare pistols, shell casings, misfired rounds, even kitchen knives. The absurdity is part of the horror. Men trained for controlled technical war, suddenly reduced to improvised survival with objects meant for other purposes. For a few chaotic minutes, the deck becomes a single collapsing space where nationality matters less than the next few inches between a throat and a blade. The Americans have the advantages here: elevation, better cover, and the momentum of a ship that still has power behind it. The U-boat's deck offers no shelter. Every man who stands up becomes a target the moment he is seen. Even so, U-405 does not die immediately. The submarine is grievously wounded, but it remains afloat, still technically a weapon, still capable of killing, if it can just buy a few seconds of room. And in war, a few seconds can be everything. On Borie, the battle has already split into two simultaneous wars: the fight above the water and the fight inside the ship's own ribs. Lucas and his engineers work like men trying to hold back a tide with their hands, because that is exactly what they are doing. Water is not a problem to solve. It is a force to endure while you steal time from it. Borie is still shooting, guns thundering, decks shaking, but Hutchins can feel the trap tightening. The U-boat is damaged, yet not dead. It still has a final weapon that can end the engagement decisively. The destroyer tries to finish it with an answer that should be clean and final: a torpedo. Prepare torpedoes. A mount rotates. A weapon is readied. One last attempt to put the submarine down with a single, unquestionable blow. The torpedo leaves the ship, carving its own dark path through the sea. And misses. The moment stretches, brittle and unbelievable. Hauptmann is still alive, and the submarine still has enough maneuvering room to attempt a desperate reversal, an attack born from the knowledge that if he does nothing, he will be finished at the next pass. Turn around, prepare torpedoes. On the destroyer, the crew watched the U-boat begin to turn, an ugly, dangerous motion that could put Borie in the crosshairs of sudden death. Hutchins makes a decision that is pure tactical instinct. If the enemy is using the destroyer's own light to aim, then the destroyer will take its light away. Disable the searchlight. The beam that had pinned the submarine in place vanishes. In the darkness, the U-boat gains the one advantage it still lacks: uncertainty. Hauptmann takes the opening immediately. Abort torpedo attack. Turn to starboard. For a few seconds, it looks like the submarine might slip away, still wounded, still bleeding life into the ocean, but alive enough to escape into the fog of night. Then Hutchins closes the trap again. Enable the searchlight. The light snaps back on, and the U-boat is revealed, caught in the open, exactly where Borie needs it to be. Hopman reacts with the only move left: evade and slip past the destroyer's side, trying to thread the needle between two lethal histories: enemy guns and enemy depth charges. "Ram it!" the Americans insist again, and the destroyer's helm strains to keep the submarine from escaping under her beam. Borie swings hard to starboard. The ship shudders as the maneuver forces her to fight both the sea and her own damage. The stern swings wide, bringing the depth charge racks into the killing arc. "Fire depth charges!" Canisters leap into the air and then vanish into the water around the U-boat like heavy punctuation marks. The explosions bloom in submerged silence, shock waves ripping through the hull, tearing what is left of the submarine's integrity into a shape that can no longer resist the ocean's pressure. For a long moment after the blasts, the sea goes still, an unnatural quiet that feels like the world holding its breath. Then, from the stricken U-boat, a new signal appears, flares, a desperate, unmistakable message: surrender. 15 survivors and their captain climb out of the wreck of their steel tube and scramble toward life rafts, bodies moving with the stiff urgency of men who have already been half buried by the sea. Borie creeps closer, ready to pull them from the water. Because even in the middle of this kind of nightmare, the rules of survival still include mercy. And then the night changes again. A lookout shouts, sharp, terrified, "Flare astern! Torpedo in the water!" The destroyer assumes what any sailor would assume in this storm. Another submarine is out there, still hunting. Hutchins has a decision that is both tactical and hateful. To save his own ship, he must turn his stern toward the incoming torpedo, presenting the smallest possible target profile. But that turn also drives Borie directly through the area where the German survivors are waiting, their lives now trapped between the destroyer's geometry and the ocean's cruelty. In the seconds it takes to execute the maneuver, the calculus becomes mercilessly clear. The ship can be saved, or the men in the water can be saved, but not both. When the immediate danger passes, the sea does not reward anyone with closure. The Atlantic is indifferent. It keeps moving, as if the last hour was only weather. Borie has won the engagement in the cold arithmetic of war. U-405 is no longer a fighting threat, but the cost is written into the destroyer's own body: flooding that cannot be stopped, compartments taking water faster than pumps can buy time, systems failing in the slow, relentless way that only the sea can enforce. Inside the ship, men who were fighting the enemy a short time ago are now fighting their own ship, wrestling with valves, forcing themselves into tight spaces where water is already pooling, trying to reach shutdown points and control points before the ocean takes those too. Eventually, the order comes that every sailor dreads, because it means the ship is no longer a ship. It is a sinking object that will start killing its own crew. Evacuate. The crew climbs toward the roof hatch, emerging into the storm like survivors of a collapsing building, cold, exhausted, and stunned by the sudden reversal from hunter to casualty. They abandon the destroyer they have been trying to save since the first contact appeared on radar. And still, the ocean collects its toll. When rescue forces finally arrive, the numbers are brutal. 27 of Borie's 122 men are gone, claimed not by enemy fire, but by the same sea that has been trying to swallow both sides since the first wave hit the hull. Hutchins survives. Engineer Kenneth Miles Lucas survives. They will carry the memory of those minutes for the rest of their lives. The moment the hunt became a brawl. The moment steel met steel. The moment the Atlantic decided the outcome was already written. U-405 has been neutralized, yet the ending is not a neat victory. It is a kind of moral fracture that war creates, when survival demands choices that feel like betrayal. Turning away from life rafts because the ship must live. Choosing the angle that saves the hull, even as it dooms men already helpless in the water. In the years after, the story repeats itself in smaller ways, passed down through families, told at kitchen tables, remembered by people who were never there, but who inherit the echo of what happened. One listener hearing a story like this remembers a great-grandfather who served as a German U-boat radio operator in the Baltic at the end of the war. Someone who survived because his commander tried to avoid fights when the war was already lost. That memory fits this night, too. The quiet recognition that sometimes the only real victory is not being forced to fight at all, and that when fighting becomes unavoidable, survival is often a roll of the dice, disguised as courage. And for modern viewers, there is another kind of shock that lands like a punch, the moment the narrative becomes personal. When the camera finally shows the crew, their voices, their fear and resolve. When the enemy is no longer a silhouette, but a human being under violence that no one truly deserves. That is why scenes like this stay with people. The depth charges, the torpedo attempts, the ramming impact, the frantic repair teams, the last-minute turns. These are not just tactical events. They are the pure, concentrated shape of war itself. Decision under pressure in darkness with the ocean waiting to collect the cost. And when the story ends, the audience is left with the same shiver that the men on both ships must have felt in the instant the fight snapped from combat to catastrophe. The knowledge that in the end, survival is not guaranteed by skill or bravery, only by the narrowest chain of seconds, choices, and luck.